The deeper and deeper I go, I find what it is I should know. 'Cause it's just a matter of time that you'll reawaken your mind. Oh, come with me, come to know and find out what is true. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening minds. Come to know and find out what is truth, yes. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening minds.
Happy Holy Day, Moors. Welcome to House of Reawakening Minds. House of Reawakening Minds exists to provide for the exploration and practice of spirituality in an enlightened community dedicated to honoring the myriad of sacred pathways to the universal creator. We are a holistic center for spiritual grounding, free thought, self-discovery, and Moorish science, an awakening experience for all ages. Tonight, I am pleased to present to you our National Grand Sheik, Taj Tarik Bey, as he, along with myself, present misrepresentations and misassumptions about contracts. But before we begin, please be sure to like, share, and if you have not already done so, subscribe and ring that little bell to our channel. Now, we are happy to present ourselves to you once again. Greetings.
Islam, Shalom, Assalamu alaikum, Vadimekum. We're going to talk a little bit about fundamental principles of contract law, or these are general principles. And one of the reasons we want to have this conversation. Now, many of you who have shared with us over the years are well grounded in fundamental and principled rules of contract. However, many of you who have recently become more cognate of the obligations or the social duties that people have by nature of organized societies. Many of you are well grounded in that, and while others are just beginning to learn, particularly in relationship to the social, economic, and political problems that have been plaguing many of the oppressed Asiatics of North America, the Aboriginal indigenous peoples. So we have a history at North America, particularly, and around the world, but we're addressing mainly at this particular time North America, which has been under hybrid European occupation for a few hundred years, which we're very familiar with. And then some of you are familiar with the oldest running political treaties operating and in force, but which have not been necessarily shared with many of the Aboriginal people here in North America. And so I find it necessary to remind many of the people who are becoming more cognate of exercising rights distinguished from privileges. We're going to go over some basic contract laws and rules. And we're also aware of the fact that by operative cognates, the persons who have been occupying or exercising social, political, and economic, judicial, civil powers on the land have negated their responsibility, particularly through the General Education Board, to teach basic civics to the people. And that motive mainly being that by not teaching civics, that has allowed them to protect corrupt government and corrupt agencies of government and corrupt organizations that are chartered with the corporate government members and owners, as well as subdivisional agencies who have been hired as contractors for people operating as government to protect their corruption and their entrenched misprision that our people have been falsely directed to as racism and prejudice, etc. So, and particularly, we want people to have a better comprehension of over the years when we have taught people to draft writs, quo warrantos as an example, averments of jurisdiction, things like that, or exercising or preserving their rights. And in a general phrase, it would be referred to as enforcing the common law or enforcing the Constitution in principle. Mm-hmm. Now, most people think, based on miscomprehensions or the way these things are mentioned to them, that when you mention the phrase enforce the Constitution, they're thinking the common document that they begin to learn a little bit about in school, but not too much, relative to the Constitution for the United States, as an example. Not knowing that when you're talking about in organized government society, when you're talking about enforcing constitutions, you're talking about treaties and the Constitution in the same document format. And I know through experience and as we've traveled the country, the land, and in different jurisdictions, that many people, as soon as you start bringing up the subject matter of Constitution, they think only of that document. But the Constitution also means the customs and traditions of your forefathers that supersede what you call legislated law or Roman law or the civil law. And so when you're talking about Constitution, you must talk about what is known as the common law. And people who don't know their history are not looking at it that way. And also, they're not looking at the fact that when you're dealing with corrupt government structures who, by design through their school systems, have not taught people basic civics, that allows them to veil or hide their corruption. And this is where many of the people have been injured over the years, over the decades, and not having gotten remedy when they sought to get remedy. Mm-hmm. So we're going to hit certain bullet points on the fact of contracts. And then we're going to do just have our general conversation as we always do, Dr. G, and see if we can help, some of the people who are beginning to learn about their birthrights, because that will come under what you call civil jurisdictions or civil jurisdiction operating on the land, etc. Were you going to make a mention? All right. So we're going to go generally with most of you, and please take notes, because some of these things will be, or subcategory issues will apply to many of you, some not directly, but it's to get you in the proper frame of mind of thinking relative to any contract. All right. Now, the fundamentals of contract. All right. So the fundamentals of contract is in its nature a promissory agreement. All right, or covenant between two or more peoples or persons, that contract creates, that contract modifies, and that contract also can be set forth to destroy a legal relation. So you're looking at both of the construction of a contract and destruction of a contract. Therefore, it's necessary to know the nature of contract to know that you also have the right to destroy contract. And many people don't know that, which is how many people who have been taking advantage of people who don't know contract law, and that's been happening commonly, is one of the motives as to why we're having this conversation. because many people have been suffering from corrupt government peoples and agencies that they hire to actually rob the people, and they've been getting away with it for decades. And so this is another reason why we're having this conversation. All right, so contracts in their nature is an agreement upon sufficient consideration to do or not to do a particular thing. And then you would look at what you call stare decisis or res judicata law cases to see examples so that you can get a comprehension of the structure and the nature. And we're making that distinction between rights and privileges, between binding or non-binding contracts, because a lot of times when people put their autograph to an instrument, they're creating in its nature a contract. And so a lot of times when people are signing things, even things that are minor, they're not aware that they're making contract. And because they haven't been taught contract law, you will see a lot of people being taken advantage of. So I'm going to get back to the point of first what contract is, to make sure everybody's clear on that. All right, so contract is an agreement between two or more parties or two or more peoples, etc. And preliminarily, which is a step in the making of which is an offer by one party or one person, natural person. We're talking about natural person, not just corporate person, natural person, right? And is accepted by another, and in which the minds of the parties meet and agree or concur, right, to understanding of terms, meaning that for a contract to be valid in the rule of contract, it must be clear. It cannot be vague. And I'm making that statement because that's one of the major areas where people who don't know contract law have been violated, and not thinking in their mind that most government agencies are in their nature lecherous and corrupt. They don't know, because of not knowing the rule of contract, that most of the instrumentalities that have been presented to them by persons holding positions of authority or assumed authority in government have actually been organized criminals.
What comes to mind as you're saying that is the fact that a lot of contracts are so laden with legalese, I guess I want to say, and fine print, that most people don't even have the wherewithal, if you will, to read everything. I'm what comes to mind is a mortgage, a dead pledge.
As an example.
As an example, in two instances, what comes up with that is, one, how much there is that is to be read. Now, the closing attorneys and so forth, and they go over things, but also the fact that they're not two parties that are signing on both sides.
Exactly, and that would be called an unconscionable contract.
So
also, because most unconscionable contracts have in their nature a veiled adhesion and is one-sided. And when it's one-sided, by right of law, contract law, you can dissolve it. Are we clear?
Mm-hmm.
And many people, by not being aware of that, never think that they can dissolve it. Okay. And so this is another reason why we're having this conversation. So again, contracts is an agreement creating an obligation, or obligations, in which there must be competent parties. So therefore, if one of the parties is not competent, which means they don't have a comprehension of what's in the contract, would imply that the contract is vague. At that point, the contract by law is void. Now, what happens with most people, they don't know that rule, which is again why we're having this conversation. And though there's many aspects or different types of contract, we'll note some of them. We want people to write them down, more than what we could discuss tonight, but we want to stay at the root of the nature of contracts so people can get in the frame of mind of starting to protect themselves presently and in the future, and also have a concept of mind how to dissolve or destroy other contracts that have been imposed upon them that they have been burdening themselves with trying to fulfill, when by right of law they had no obligation to fulfill. But because they didn't dissolve the contract, they're continuing with an obligation, i.e. getting robbed or abused or taken advantage of. And that is a greater part of why we're having this discussion. And I also want you to write down, all of you, write down third-party interloper, because that's very important. Third-party interloper. Because we're going to deal with that part a little bit to clear up some things. But let's get back to the nature of contract. And then we're going to share, say, chapter 30 of the Circle 7 Quran, dealing with social duties, so that we can have a concept of our natural responsibility in society too, which is a contract, all right, in organized society. Now, so the contract is a deliberate engagement. It's not accidental, meaning that you don't bump into them. You know, you don't trip over them and therefore have an obligation type thing. You know, it's a conscious thing. And it must never be vague. So it must be by competent parties. So write down competent, because it's important for that to be in your state of mind. Now, so it must be mutual of obligation. It must have consideration, clear in the subject matter, right? And the agreement or contract must not be so vague or so uncertain that a term or that the terms of that contract are not ascertainable, which means if they construct a contract that creates a burden that they know that you can't fulfill, the contract is dead ab initio. Write this phrase down, ab, A-B, initio. That means from its construct.
Okay, question. So 2008, the mortgage, the housing crash and so forth.
Yes.
Due in part to a lot of lenders who were filling
disingenuous,
out faulty, false information with regard to the purchaser's ability to really pay, and they knew it. Now they both knew it.
That means to ascertain that. So that's relative to what you're saying right now.
Okay.
All right.
That in that case, in those cases or in those instances, I can understand by right of law, understanding it not being it being like I said, void ab initio. However, when you think in terms of when you go to the closing, we've already had your account gone into to extract the finances to pay to satisfy
yes.
the terms of the mortgage. However, with this double booking that they do,
bookkeeping, which means is non-disclosure,
right?
Which means if it's non-disclosed, that means it's unclear and it's vague.
Right.
Now I want you to hold that thought,
okay,
and continue your conversation, but we want everyone to follow along.
Okay.
You must be cognizant of your right at any point that you find that nature. By law, the contract is already dead. Now, you must destroy it, meaning that you cannot continue. You can if you choose to, but it is not your obligation to continue the duty or the obligation when the semantics was designed to create vaguity or to veil the obligations or the assertions. And so if you can't ask, if it's ascertainable, it is by law void. Now, most people don't know that, and this is where, as an example, most people didn't know that most of your large so-called real estate corporations, the very politicians who have legislated in support of them secretly have stock in all of them. This is another part of why the people don't get remedy when they discover these things, and they start looking for remedy and then hiring a member of the Circle Church and Chancery known as lawyers and attorneys, by them not knowing that these people are actually connected and that they created the fraud in the first place. When they seek remedy, they have difficulty, because even them not knowing that the courts are the courts, which are not really courts, they're really trafficking venues under the United States, as an example, corporation, there's been no lawful Article 3 courts operating on the land since 1789. That very fact right there tells you a lot, doesn't it? Yeah. However, even people who are aware of contract law, many have not been aware of that fact. This is one of the bullet points we want to present so that we can have a comprehension of for the people why we're having this conversation. Even though we can't talk points on everything, we want to put them in a frame of mind relative to the importance of this subject matter in relationship to their everyday lives and their economics. But they must come to a reasonable level of competence, because everybody can't fight for them, if you get the point. And if they're seeking members of the Bar Association, California Bar, American Bar, British Bar, etc., they haven't been aware that they are really Sadducees and Pharisees, and they created the corruption, which is, again, why they don't teach civics. So here we go again. Why are we having this conversation? We want to share with our listening audience, the people who shared with us over the years, some basics to get their frame of mind in a proper direction, so over different studies, they can look at things differently with knowledge, not with emotion, and it will begin to reduce them being taken advantage of. Now, I think it was around, remember when they had the so-called housing crash in around 2007, 2008?
2008, yes, that's what.
And then you seen a lot of law cases or suits going up, and you saw a lot of, because it was forced by the people starting to fight back, that a lot of people's mortgages, so-called debts, disappeared, when the truth of the matter, all of them should have disappeared, but they wouldn't allow that to happen because they know most people are cognizant of what we're talking about right now. So they allowed a few people to go through or be relieved of the fraud of the debt in order to look like the politicians was doing something about so-called mortgage fraud. But the real deal is all of them, every last one of them was a fraud.
That's the point I wanted to make. Even though what we're saying about the contract, at the point, even if one did not, have a proper knowledge of what was actually going on, the terms and so forth, the fact that the funds had been paid or had been satisfied, had been satisfied because of their ability to go into, I guess, the Siskiyou Trust account and then that's where the double
and then let's look at this,
right. Well, that's where the double booking comes in. So not on the basis of, I can't fulfill the obligations of the contract, so I'm going to leave my home or my domicile. But that's where the fight or the argument needs to be. But it's already satisfied.
Let's look at this.
I mean, would that with knowledge, would that not be
I want
an
to
argument?
clear up. You're correct, but I want to clear up your correction statement.
Okay.
Number one, this is what people must be clear on. The obligation was not paid. And this is one of the traps.
Satisfied?
You can say that. No, it was called set off or discharged. Write this down. Set off, quote unquote. Discharged, quote unquote. Not paid off.
Because you can't.
Now, it's very clear. Set off, discharged, not paid.
Okay.
The concept that they have paid is part of the fraud. Are we clear? We must comprehend the constructive fraud that exists. Because remember, when people are taking care of business like that, they're not thinking in their mind that the government people that have been regulated in their lives are actually organized criminals. It never dawns on them. They think here and there are people who are a little bit out of order, and that there are opportunistic people who have, say, some insurance agency over here or some real estate agency. It never dawns on them that the United States Corporation Company is a corporate foreign company and not a country. And even when over the years we've shared, the corporate papers to give the people the right state of mind. So the people, even their concept thinking that these people are legitimate government is the beginning of the fraud. And so there's nowhere in its construct subdivisional agencies where there is justice or honor for the people. This is part of what people have not comprehended about forced servitude, or about in the common language, people thought slavery ended. And then some will analyze that it's been institutionalized. This is part of it through contract, which is again why we're having this conversation. See, so as you were talking, you were absolutely in projection correct, but the language assumed that you were paying a bill based on the semantics and the misrepresentation that has been taught in society, which itself is fraud. So anything constructed under that system is a fraud. This is the reason why people were not allowed to get remedy in the courts, because the court system is a fraud. And I know it's hard for a lot of people to accept that, but if we teach the basics of Constitution principle, treaty principle, enforcement principle, the principle of breaching, the principles of trust, which we've always been discussing for years, they would be able to remedy themselves. But people have been trained to believe in the agencies of the organized governing bodies that have been governing on the land for the last few hundred years. And so they have no concept, for the most part, of the gates out, because the very people who have been governing are the criminal. See, just like people as an example, most people, if you're talking Constitution principle, right, and you ask the average man, woman that deal with business every day, that sign things every day, if you ask them what's the nobility clause in Constitution principle, and they would, most of them start guessing and jumping around, or not knowing that the nobility clause disallows Sadducees and Pharisees to hold office in government. That means lawyers and attorneys cannot hold public office under the United States, the legitimate republic. Now, show cause if any of these administrative clerks who have been telling these people they're magistrates and judges, and you'll find them, men and women, are attorneys and lawyers. The people who these people have been calling congressmen and senators, attorneys and lawyers, none of them by law were to hold any of those offices. Now, because people don't know constitutional law and they don't know contract law, because logically these people are not going to allow civics to be taught in school and in their civic organizations. Now, as an aside, Dr. G, this is one of the reasons why, just for people who are studying, as a footnote, while you've seen over the years those who say study the FBI papers of the infiltration investigation of the Moorish Science Temple of America and the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, this is where you see the conflict that you hear here and there about different Moorish groups some teaching civics, and then some who have been pretty much controlling the grander body that have been openly and publicly in opposition. Why? Because it would expose everybody. And even a child, say a teenager, a child who could read, learning basic contract law, could see fraud. But if the semantics is part of the education, because remember, the people don't get erudition, they get education.
Absolutely.
So they think that they've been paying bills. They have not been paying bills. The Federal Reserve notes are privately owned voucher instruments known as private commercial paper belonging to the Federal Reserve Board, which belongs to the Circle Church and Chancery, which is in Fleet Street, England. So the people have no idea that all of the places that they've been calling court systems are ran from England. They think, like, say, for instance, they think that the governors of the different states, through the legislatures, etc., are running the courts. They're secondary principles. They're secondary agencies of the principles, which is the Circle Church and Chancery. And another reason I'm bringing this up is because over the last few months, I've had different people, approach me as I've been traveling, just asking different questions. And I had a couple of people ask me every once in a while, I hear you talking about the Circle Church and Chancery, and they've never heard of it. But it's important because it affects their everyday life. Just because it's not talked about because it's a source of corruption. That has been the backbone of judicial operations at North America on the land, dealing judicial civil power on the land since 1700s, late 1700s. Before, this is again why a lot of people who don't know this don't know the connection of or the nature of what was one of the motives as to why the so-called social reconstructors of history at North America and the school system set up by John D. Rockefeller and Frederick T. Gates have been telling the people that George Washington, as an example, was the first president for the United States. No, he wasn't. He was the 9th. Although we've been telling these people this for over 35 years and giving them documents from the Library of Congress proving that fact, right?
Right.
Most people would not connect that to contract, would they, in their mind?
No.
And so it wouldn't dawn on them that the whole government structures that they've been living under before they were even born was in its whole entire nature corrupted.
Well, in a corrupted contract.
Its whole construct is based in human trafficking. And so the people's mind has been told the so-called founding fathers represent freedom and liberty. They were some of the biggest slaveholders. George Washington had over 300 slaves and concubines that he abused. Thomas Jefferson, too. Now remember, Thomas Jefferson was one of the ministers plenipotentiary.
Which means?
Under the treaties. So they breached the treaty because remember, the treaty supersede. This is why they don't teach the people that the treaty is the supreme law of the land. They'll hear, so that's not even in the people's mind, is it? Is it at all? Just like when we talk about treaty, right? And consular venue, which has gained popularity with people who've been listening to the House of Reawakening Minds, say in the last 10 years or so, right? And you see people starting to gravitate to that venue. That's constitutional enforcement. But if by virtue of the people not being taught the real history, they're looking at it as a separate subject matter of interest for some active Moors that have been called renegade by people who they assume were grand governors of the Moorish temple, etc., who has the authority relative to the redemption of the Moors. Even though they would read, as an example, in the divine warning by the prophet for the nations, where the prophet Noble Ali said, enforce the Constitution. But their mind would only be on that one document. This is why they would never have these kind of discussions. Why? Because you would have to study and study again. And once you do, you start seeing the component parts. And at that time, you're able to see for yourself. You know, what they don't want people to do is to start seeing for themselves. They want followers. They want citizens. They don't want nationals. They want subjects, not liberated men and women. And so the reality is we have generations of miscomprehensions, misunderstandings, you know, and thus the misrepresentations have taken root. And the misrepresentations have been the frame of mind in the average being's mind in their view of how to do business, meaning they've been groomed in false concept, which is why they don't understand contract. Now, let me make these points. And those of you who are listening, make these points and write them down and go over this video here and there and you know, take your time, write these things down. Number one, for a contract to be valid, the parties entering into contract must be of competent mind, cannot be a minor. And know that minority equates minor. These are different social phrases that people have not been told their true meaning. This is why we've always told people study wardship tenures. All right. Contract cannot be vague. Contract cannot be vague. And these rules are elementary. Remember, if a contract's being constructed, while it's being constructed, whether you sign it or not, if any of these points that I'm making right now are identifiable, the contract is dead ab initio, even if they've been operating with it. They've only been taking advantage of people who don't know law. This is why many people over the years, particularly people in different organized bodies who've been generating finance off the common people, didn't like Drew Ali. That's why many of the people who keep claiming, you know, to have authority in the redemption of our people don't like people like me. And it's not that it's personal necessarily. It is because of what we're sharing with the people that has been held back from them. Because we remember knowledge is power. See, because once people know these principles, they don't need lawyers. Also, they don't need ministers over their heads stealing from them in the name of tithing. You know how, like, an old Berber phrase, old Moabite Saba phrase says, know ye the truth and the truth will make you free? No contract law, because most of people's enslavement is by virtue of contracts, including contracts they didn't even know was a contract. And then instruments were presented to them and they were tricked into signing them in the name of contract without being told they were contract. And they didn't know they were contract because they didn't know contract law. They're assuming that they were something else, which is again why we're having this conversation. Not just because we were talking in general, is because even when people over the years have come onto the venues of the official House of Reawakening Minds and looked at different classes that we've had over the years at different times, and some of the questions that evolved out of them, it is simply because many of the people were not aware. They're intelligent. They don't lack intelligence. They were not aware of the principles that undergird contract law, and therefore they would have, with good intentions, wrong conceptions of things. And even where some of the things that we would present, some people didn't comprehend or understand, and thus certain questions would be asked, which would be logical. It is because they didn't have a foundation in contract law. And again, so society itself is embedded with contracts. And they need to be told that so that they can be more cognate and more diligent. But because the social structure from its order, from its beginning itself was constructed in fraud. Logically, they're not going to teach the people. And so you'll see the people always talking about racism, fakeries like contemporary fakery, like Black Lives Matter and things like that. And they actually think it means one thing and it doesn't mean at all what they think it means. And it's a contract once they engage in it. And that's assumption, what you call assume contract or implied contract, etc. So let me read a little bit more and give the people some notes, and then we'll, just continue casual discussion in these matters. So cannot be vague, cannot be a minor or minority, because now look that up in the law dictionary because people think it means numbers, social status. Cannot be vague. It must be of reasonable and sufficient consideration. It must be structured in such a way that the average everyday man or woman can read it and comprehend it. If it's loaded with semantics, the intent 90% of the time is fraud. If it's constructed by one party without the other party participating in its construction, most of the time it's linear. And a linear contract usually is not designed in honor. So in order for people to protect themselves, we need for them to have a basic knowledge so they'll have a capacity to read contracts and make such modifications before they sign it. And it's important for them to know that when they put their autograph on these instruments, at that point, the instrument becomes a negotiable instrument. No one telling them that. Keep this in mind. Any instrument that they tell you to put your signature to or your autograph to, at that point, it becomes binding, which is why they ask. Now, so isn't it fair and intelligent that we have this conversation to give people basics so they can start protecting themselves and not necessarily need some other man or woman that they got to pay or they got to compensate in any means with their energy output to speak for them? Because remember, at the point that you have to do that, you're in what are called a subject or wardship position. At that point, now, whether they choose to do that or not, they need to be aware of that. The injury is that most people aren't aware of that. Back again, why we're having this conversation. Now, so people not being aware of the rule, it's sort of like we've been goaded into playing games every day from childhood into adulthood, a game that clearly the masses don't know, the game that they're playing. And the people who've been presenting it have been controlling their estate, and they don't know. Even when they've been so-called educated with degrees, even not knowing that education basically is animal husbandry. Most of them, even as you have shared with me in certain conversations, mentioning erudition to people who teach or who have the title of educator, and notice their eyes brighten up and rethinking, and they recognize that what you were saying was actually correct.
Absolutely.
It was never brought to their attention. So we're bringing things to their attention. Now,
from a stand, just
go ahead.
I was thinking, how many of us know, maybe more know now, but knew that when we went to a banking or institution and signed, did a signature card, fill out the thing, put our finances and resources in there, that we were in effect giving our resources over, or lending them rather.
Exactly. They didn't say that, Judy, did they?
They didn't. Lending them to the banks, at which they have no obligation, really, even though they talk about FDIC insured. But in the event that they have an issue, they have a right to try
to before you
to
do,
limit-
it becomes their asset.
to make themselves whole before they even give
Now,
you.
we need to know why.
Yes.
This is what happens.
Okay.
When you go to these institutions run by the Circle Church and Chancery. Now, I'm saying that because people need to know that. Get used to that phrase, that name,
Circle Church.
that construct.
Okay.
Circle, Church, and Chancery, with its main headquarters located at Fleet Street, England, which embodies a body of men known as British Accredited Registry members. It is a foreign, private, for-profit corporate entity belonging to the Vatican, answerable via Buckingham Palace through the Queen of England, through the corporate entity styled as the United States Company, that people have been told falsely is a country that has been operating on the land at America for centuries and has created the poverty problems that our people have been experiencing. And this including the bombings of, say, Tulsa, Oklahoma, the bombings of Move in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the murder of Emmett Till that they make movies of, on and on and on, the murder of Malcolm X, the murder of Martin Luther King, on and on and on.
The cells of Henrietta Lacks.
Exactly. The 420 missing children every year, regulated by people that these people who don't know contract have been thinking and have been trained to think is, quote unquote, their government. In a nutshell, that's the general root of all the economic, social, political, and abuse problems that have been plaguing the land and the people of the land, Aboriginal people, the true Ibri people of the land who have been tagged Negroes, blacks, coloreds, Indians, etc., and the other various Asiatic African tribes, also known as Aboriginal and Indigenous people. That's a fact. As of recent years, logically, because other nation states have been interrupting their trade operations and not buying or trading in their reserve, the Jesuits' Federal Reserve note, which is going on right now, even as we speak, has created problems for them. And the people need to know what's really going on. And so now you're talking about international trade, if you get the point, with the instrumentalities that are constructed, known as U.S. T-bonds. That has much to do with what's going on right now. And because, remember about 7 or 8 years ago, at the House of Reawakening Minds, when the building was still active,
Mm-hmm.
and I reminded everyone, keep their minds on and pay attention to Deutsche Bank.
Yes, I do remember that.
In Germany?
Yes.
All right. Now, they may not be talking about it now, but the reason I been telling people this, because I already know as this thing blows out, that's going to come into the news. Because that's where these politicians that these people think their votes put in office have a lot of their so-called slush funds in mortgages on these people's backs, including original manufacturers' titles of origins on all their vehicles that they did not deliver to these people, and these people thought they'd been buying vehicles. Remember, that's another subject matter. Contract.
When you think that even if you did have a, say, a 4-year or 7-year, even because they've extended them, loan for a vehicle at the end of that you should get that original, that certificate?
Now the fact that over the years I mentioned these things, and like I say, all of these are subcategory contractual issues that within themselves require a teaching and instruction. Even as we were talking before, and as I'm talking now, in order for people to start dealing with these things, which they're going to need to do to start saving their families economically, which is why we've always mentioned them. But I know that if we even got into these matters by the people not being grounded in fundamental contract law, they will be always looking for someone to do their work for them, which would be impossible. Meaning that, like, look at this. As an example, you have a lot of conscious people, or what you call people on a path of awakening to what's going on in the political realm, and have been studying and working and actively sharing information with each other to bring remedy to themselves on injuries that they didn't even know before this information being shared with them. They didn't even know that they were in servitude, which was part of the problem because they didn't know contract. They were assuming that they were liberated. So if you, as an example, Dr. G, so write this down, everyone who's listening. Original manufacturer's title of origin, but put that in an acronym form. And so people who've been traveling around in vehicles, in their conveyances, thinking that they owned these cars the same way the people thought they owned houses. It's the same as the mortgages, no different. Even people not knowing what derivatives are, not knowing that the paperwork for the marriages, for the birth certificates, for the vehicles, for the houses were bundled. They were bundled together and made in what is known as derivatives and are delivered to New York on Water Street. And that's the major basis of the stock market. So that very fact is part of contract that people didn't even know existed. They thought that, oh, I own the car, my car out there in the back, and the one that I had parked, I still got the title to that, right? And it says certificate of title. That's called semantics. Semantics.
Okay.
All right. So of is a preposition. So the instrument is a certificate that informs that a title exists, but it itself is not the title. This is again why they don't teach etymology. But even the learning process, when they start enforcing, making parents send their children to school, that's in the contract, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And the implied contract is that they were going to make these people competent to operate in society. They didn't tell them that they were forcing them under an institution of animal husbandry, of indoctrination. Yet the experience is exactly that, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And as a matter of fact, many people who over the decades who've written different books about the injuries to the people relative to the so-called education system, even books like Johnny Can't Read and things like that, and the miseducation of the quote-unquote monkey species known as Negro. Not even know that Negro means the monkey. Negro de Avera Arrebo, or troglodyte nigger. Pongidae, which is the scientific name for Anthropopithecus, which is the gorilla monkey species. And they think it means African people. Things as simple as that. It's a contract. But the promise was that, and they forced the people, they taxed their houses. One of the largest taxes that are on people's houses that they think they own is school tax, isn't it? Start looking at what the tax basis. They're forcing the people to pay for the miseducation of their children, which guarantees a new flock of stock, livestock. That quote unquote livestock is real. The people didn't know that it's them. So when people, now we know that slavery is connotative. The use of it, it's actually forced servitude and birthright theft. But the common word or the layer is called slavery. And so the people were trained that slavery ended in 1865 with manumission as an example. So even the legislation is a contract of transferring the natural people from the hybrid European families operating on the land at North America to the auspices of their representative Congress, who were members of the Circle Church and Chancery. And that's what the manumission is. The people thought or trained in school that manumission was liberation or freedom. No, the manumission is a transfer by contract from the hands of one body, the large body of people who were what you would call citizens or subdivisional owners or beneficiaries of the United States corporation company registered in Austria and run from Davos, Switzerland, and misrepresented as a country that actually has been doing what? By organized order, doing their human trafficking. And people thought that U.S. citizen was a citizen's benefit operation. No, it's human trafficking in a constructed form entity known as the United States Service Corporation Company. You see the point? Now, so people don't even know that the Constitution for the United States and the treaties, what kept them in check, which is why you will not see the politicians or any persons doing business as their subdivisional agents say the republic. You'll always see them say, quote unquote, their democracy. Because that is the platform that they've been operating. But it is what? Unconstitutional. Misrepresentation, misprision, literally treason from the top to the bottom. And so the people have been trained that when they started having problems economically and by social constructs, as an example, where they would target the Aboriginal people in different communities, and they call it gentrification, which is another form of genocide. So they give it a different name that people don't think genocide. And it's done through what? Legislation. But the people don't know color of law, quote unquote, color of authority, quote unquote, color of office, quote unquote, colored people, quote unquote, all which are what? De facto and fraudulent and artificial in their nature. And the people don't know that they're trained to agree to these platforms in the name of government and service to the people. And the people have been served up, not unlike a steak on a platter. And then they've been trained that that equals racism. So they could forget that they're actually suffering unum sanctum colonization. It's a diversion, masking, pretext, artifice. And so the people have been trained for generations, and logically, with good intention, the mothers would teach their children, and their sense of remedy would always be in the constructs of the agencies that were contracted by the corporate state legislators who they thought were their government. And yet they always saw this conflict. It was always dragged out. They never got remedy. It always cost them more. And they never really were ever satisfied with anything. But they didn't know that this structure itself is fraud. They thought that, say for instance, there was this bank in certain neighborhoods that redballed the people, targeted people, and they couldn't, get certain services, or their houses and their property was not protected,
redlining
over and over and over, generation after generation, when it's a designed genocide attack. But over a period of time, the people would not know it because they can't read contracts. They didn't even know that they were participating in it. Unwillingly, willingly. Which made them unconscionable.
Well, let's go back to the first contracts that we have or dealt, and would that be the birth certificate?
No, the first would be issued by the popes of Rome, and particularly in North America. And write this down, you all. Daughters of the American Revolution, known as the DAR. And they have a marble house located at the Seven Hills at the territory, which is known as Washington District of the Roman Goddess Columbia, known as Washington, D.C. Issued from there, from the DAR, on behalf of the Circle Church and Chancery, via the Bishopric of the Order of the Jesuits, on behalf of the Vatican, marriage license.
So that was the first.
Certificate. That instrument is known as, quote unquote, bottomry instrument. Write that down. Bottom, just like bottom of something, bottomry instrument. One of many. The bottomry instrument, known as the marriage certificate, owned by the Vatican, issued by the Bar Association via the Circle Church and Chancery, via the DAR, Daughters of the American Revolution, to the subdivisional orders of the agencies of the corporate states, which are subdivisional franchises of the United States company, etc., claims ownership of the womb and the fallopian tube, left and right, and the eggs in it of the people who they have declared state wards or conquered people or subject people under occupation, given under the guise of holy matrimony crap, marriage certificate, which the Pope of Rome, via those agencies and subdivisional agencies, including the church members, no matter what the denomination, who perform the ritual of the sacrifice, they claim the womb and the eggs in the womb. That's the marriage certificate. The later instrumentality, which was used to claim the eggs of the fallopian tube that hatch, that means the unborn, or that means the born among the unborn. The birth certificate claims them. And that's the cycle. So one of the first bottomry instruments that funded the U.S. Treasury notes, particularly since 1862, known as U.S. T-bills, were marriage certificates. They fractionalized those instruments, bottomry instruments, for decades until they were no longer accepted by other nation states, and the fractionalization or the selling of the other bottomry instrument that you know as the birth certificate was around the time when Franklin Delano Roosevelt, praetor for the United States Service Corporation after they went bankrupt again, used the birth certificates. That's around between 1928 and 1930 and 33, in that area. And that's known as the banker's holiday. Now, over the years, we've given you the executive orders that was issued by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, unbeknownst to the people. The birth certificate was then used to fund or to refund the bankrupted United States Corporation Company that the people, again, have been trained is so-called their country. So the birth certificate is secondary to the marriage certificate. Are we clear?
Okay.
Now, you got to remember 19 and 13, when Grand Dragon of Kaiklos, Ku Klux Klan, one of the Grand Dragons known as Woodrow Wilson, met with members of the Circle Church and Chancery, i.e. Sadducees and Pharisees of the Circle Church and Chancery. England met at what is known as Jekyll Island, 1913. Now remember, the United States company went bankrupt then. And at that time, that's when they converted all allodial titles and all aboriginal titles of the natural national people of the land into mortgages and deeds, 1913. This you will see in the congressional records that Trafficant was talking about when he spoke on the floor of the House of Representatives, which later got him murdered. Mm-hmm. And they say he had an accident on the farm. They say that the tractor turned over on him. He was eliminated. Mm-hmm. And also in 1932, and I apologize at the name of this at the moment, one of the senators who spoke on that operation of that misrepresentation, he went to visit his daughter in New York and they poisoned him. And we talked about that in at the house. And again, you can see how this can go into a whole bunch of different areas that we've talked about, all of which can be taught, a lesson can be taught on their own. And I don't want to get too far away, but I want to keep people in the frame of mind of the importance for them to begin to understand the basics of contract law so that the people can start helping themselves and not be taken advantage of by people who have this knowledge and have not been sharing it with them, and who have not been trying to share it with them in order that they too can and have been taking advantage of the people via their economic problems for generations. This is again why, as we've been talking over the years, Dr. G, that you've heard me at different times, I would talk about different subject matters, but when I did say maybe 18 years ago, when I did in Connecticut, in that area, and I talked about the dangers of the UCCs and was doing an analysis, not condemning them, but explaining to people why that was even presented to the people, which is another form of commercial trade contract. And the people thought they were going to become holder in due course of the Sister Q V Trust that most of them didn't even know exist, or even the Global World Trust, also referred to as the World Global Trust, all controlled by the Vatican, legislated upon, even the Cusick number on the Social Security that Franklin Delano Roosevelt issued after they issued the birth certificate to be bottom re-instrument to restock with livestock certificates, the United States Corporation, 1933, the so-called bank holiday. We're back to contract law. All of those are contracts. But for the most part, by the people not knowing that it was actually human trafficking, the average person never thought to contest any of this, did they? And they allowed them to go on, didn't they? And then so the people, as their children grow up, they say, oh, you've got to get a Social Security card to work. Notice the adhesion? So they're trained from childhood to sign these contracts that they think present one thing and they never did.
So what you're saying is that people did not need, or still do not need.
Exactly, never did.
But the issue is that most of the so-called employers,
because they're franchisees.
The employers are attached to saying, we need your social security number.
Now, and you're correct.
So when folks got to eat, folks got to live.
Speak out.
Yeah, they got to eat. They got to live.
Speak out.
I'm looking at the comments. You don't see them. I just want y'all to know.
Connection.
Y'all are saying some stuff. Y'all saying Taj been saying the same thing over and over. Y'all need him to be a savior, pretty much, but he's not. You need him to be the government. Do what you should do. But I'm just saying these are the comments. When is it going to be over? What can we do? What good is history? I'm just going through the comments. So because of that is the feeling. And I even saw one comment that what you're teaching is just putting fear in people. But if you tell the truth, it shouldn't put fear. It should put you into action. But nevertheless, if that's what it does, I really don't think we send out any information to cause fear. Matter of fact, we've had one where we do a session called "Fear Not."
Yeah.
Don't fear. This is not for you to become fearful.
Remember, ignorance is the root of fear.
And that's the problem. We did not know a lot of things, and the fact that you say things you say it redundantly. There's always someone. I got a call tonight. Call tonight about a half hour before we went live. A brother called, and he just discovered us like last week.
Mm-hmm.
He'll be 70 at the beginning of the year, and he was excited. It's like, I want to learn more. So there's some of you who have been on here and been following Grand Sheik for years, and some of you just found out that
this is for newbies.
That exists. So there might be other channels that may be given, maybe more esoteric or deeper information, something that may move you. This is for hopefully
function.
Yeah, this is hopefully to bring things to your remembrance. Those of you who've already heard it, and maybe move you to action. And for
help
those who've never
members
heard,
who don't know.
Absolutely.
See, because remember when I opened this up, Doc, it's sort of like we know that people have been studying for years. The address is not for them. It's for the youth who were babies when we started teaching this stuff, that are growing up now into a collapsing economy, who don't know any of this.
But you know what, Grand Sheik, I just have to differ with you just a little bit, because, for instance, TikTok.
Yeah.
On TikTok, the young people are coming. They are researching.
Yes.
They are coming up with the most amazing insight into what has happened, what is happening, and what may happen. And so there is another generation, because our generation, I'm almost looking your generation, but the ones that have come after the ones after us are the ones seem like they're about to take this thing.
And this is the point. Look at this.
And that's what you want to do. Lay foundations to be built upon.
That's what so that they don't spend a lot of years trying to figure out these little tidbits of information that they get. Because this is what the corruptors have been counting on. That without direct instruction, the people will gain this information over a period of decades. By the time they get grounded, they don't have a functional structure. And that most of them will be destroyed when they get to a point. You know how like people often say, if I knew then what I know now? You hear that phrase all the time, Doc.
Mm-hmm.
You know why? Because there's no direct civic instruction,
right?
In general,
and
this is why
they want.
I've been redundant,
but they want, just like one comment, they want step by step. This isn't the place. This isn't the platform for the step by step. Some things, like I said, we are looking
exposing keys,
right? But we need but there is a way. Yes. I'm pretty sure there is. But I've heard in my short 11 years of this knowledge, I've heard so many different ways. They don't all come from you. Mm-hmm. Right, but there's like a million, as many folks that think that they got the answer. There's a different way.
But the deal of it is, why are we even doing this? Meaning that if the people choose not to act on this information, they also have that right.
Right.
And the result or the reward that they reap will be whatever they've sown.
Well, I just want to say this to the ones that have a problem with what you're saying or what we're saying or not saying. How would you feel, if we weren't doing this little part? Because this is the little part. This isn't the big. This isn't the whole.
Exactly.
This is just our contribution.
Let's look at this.
This is simply our. Listen, I even saw some comments about in the beginning about last couple of times they haven't been on camera. It's like, but we are here live. We didn't want you to focus on us and what we look like. We wanted to
focus on the
words.
Notes.
We're here. This is not a recording.
Take notes.
This is absolutely live. And if y'all want to see me Tuesday nights, I show my face, right? I'm not hiding. But what I'm saying is we wanted to be able to have a dialogue, so that in that dialogue, almost like you are like a fly on the wall, listening to what we are discussing a lot of time based on the calls, the queries that come in, the emails, the text messages that come in, and then we try to address as much as we can. And then, Grand Sheik, whatever comes on your heart or mind that needs to be said, of course, I try to hone up so that at least I can have an intelligent conversation with you. You're not my savior.
These are
no, I'm just saying, even though we work very closely together, I realize that I have a responsibility. I have a lot of stuff that comes at me. Information, people calling saying, "Oh, Dr. G, did you know this? This will work. I can get this out, this person out. I can fix that." I hear it all, but you still have to discern what will work for you, now, what will work for me. That's not what may work for the next person.
What makes the foundation of discernment? Knowledge of how things work. Now, some people have problems with truth because they'd rather live the lie. This information is not for them. It's for people who are seeking to restore their liberties, their rights, and their freedoms. Remember, why is it in general, at mass, as an example, why we are in the economic malaise that we're in? It's for people being in denial and not wanting the truth. And when people share the truth with them, as we've been doing for years, because remember, for years, people were rejecting what we were saying. It's not like, we've been saying this for years and people have been operating on it. What's happening in recent years, people have organized around, not just here at North America, but around the world, and have been applying this knowledge, which is why you're starting to see people make videos in different areas that are still related to the restoration of their lost estate. But without knowing what a state is, without knowing that these are fraudulent and misrepresented and miscomprehended and misunderstood contracts that was binding them or creating obligations, they didn't know that they could dissolve them. They thought that these burdens were on them to take, to hold, and to live out. And thus many people that are in poor families don't even know, and because no one told them what a third party interloper is. Now, because people have been starting to study, and a lot of the youth have been picking up this information, which is why the stock market is in trouble now, because it's killing the straw man, which is what the intention of this redundancy has been. In other words, it's taking root, not just here around the world.
And we do want you all to activate that which is inside of you. I told you the other day, Grand Sheik, remember I told you, I told Mother Ella Woods, I said, I'm going to do a live stream and I'm going to call it, and this is no shade on anybody who said anything there, because I said this the other day. I said, I'm going to do a live stream. I'm going to call it, everybody's looking for a savior, save yourself. Exactly. Well, that wasn't to be sarcastic. It was to empower people to recognize what they have inside of them that has been, we have been bombarded. Yeah, those things have been suppressed. We have been bombarded and we've been manipulated.
And they don't know their power.
Right. It's like that question in Superman Kyle, remember who you are. Most of us don't know the power that we have. And so what we really want to do, at least I know I do, and I believe that's still been your mission for the last 40 plus years, is to empower people to know who they are and to activate that greatness that's within them. And first of all, we need to operate from a place of love. I think love is the greatest weapon of mass construction, Grand Sheik. Really, if we would just get love in our heart, if we would just work on our heart chakras, I think we could come together. Folks are saying we need to come together. Yeah, we do. But as long as we have hate one for
people need to know.
We need to love ourselves, first of all. So it's hard to love other people, but we need to come from a place of love. And then we can overpower and overcome this stuff. But we're too divisive.
People need to know that the come and save you concept is part of the mind control that has kept the people enslaved. They keep looking for paradigms that have actually been MK Ultra constructs that they thought was a part of religious instruction, which was actually put in place to keep them from knowing their power. Which is why some of these things must be presented redundantly. It's not that people didn't hear these things. They have not been acting on it. But they're looking for someone else to do for them what they must do for themselves. From the metaphor, right? Metaphysical philosophy. The Berber philosophy says every man, every woman, every child must confess their own and worship under their own vine and fig tree. They must know how that attaches to the common law. This is back to the issue of civics, because people don't know that that statement is a civic statement. People's concepts that what was presented to them only as religion is separate from from civics, and it isn't. But that was part of the mind control. And so as long as they look for an outside savior and an outside God, all the priesthood had to do was keep them looking outside themselves, which is the structure that the people have been trained in under education. And so they're looking, when we're showing them fundamental truths that they deal with every day.
But you know what, Grand Sheik? I wonder how many people who want to figure out how to get out of this and how to fix that would be willing to embark in studies that will go beyond. In other words, it wouldn't have anything to do necessarily with nationality and birthright, but to get into their more etheric metaphysical selves, because there are, like I said earlier, untapped powers and abilities.
Let's look at what they don't know.
But they could do things could be done.
Let's look at what they don't know.
If they stop being so human.
Let's look what they don't know.
Okay.
Let's see.
Right.
There's an assumption that this information does not embody nationality when it absolutely does. When you say, because the nativity is dealing with heritability. See, the honor of your mothers and fathers principle that you find in philosophy, in African philosophy, and translated from the Book of the Dead to Septuaginta to the Bible, is rooted in social structure. It's dealing with heritability. The nationality that people think is some kind of separate subject matter is, as an example, for people who can think a little bit. Look in the Septuaginta or Bible in the area around Isaiah 64, 65, and you'll see this phrase. Or you'll see the conversation where the principle or the divine spirit, the Most High, says to the people, says, you have robbed me of a whole nation of people. You have robbed God. They say, how say thee that we have robbed God? This is the Sadducees and Pharisees, etc., Romans. He says, yes, you have robbed me, even of a whole nation of people, and you have put your name on them as a curse. But I will slay thee and call them by another name. The action that takes place, part of the action that takes place in social order, it's called nativity restoration, known as nationalization. It says, I hold my hand out all the day long to a hard-hearted and rebellious people who were not called by my name. When they repent from their sinful ways, I will hear from heaven and heal their land. Over the years, we've taken people continuously to law books and told them to look up land. It means far more than what they know. We cannot re-educate them in a 2-hour, 3-hour, 4-hour, 4-month session, what Rome has done to them for the last few centuries. However, in order to break the spell, they must know that the priesthood is part of the corruption. Because if they're not going to let the priesthood go, they're not going to let Rome go. And if they're not going to let Rome go, we can speak redundantly and they get no cure. However, the rule, the old Berber rule is this. The old Moabite Berber rule is this. When Yeshua's great-great-grandmother, known as Ruth, prayed for the restoration of the nation, he says, whosoever will, let him hear. Whosoever will, let him come. Right. The people keep looking for someone to walk for them, for someone to talk for them, for someone to do for them. Fact, you must do for self through free will. Okay. Those who know the truth must tell the truth. For those who keep misunderstanding and miscomprehending even what the Prophet Noble Ali said to the Moors since 1913, he says, I've given you more than enough to save yourselves. Now go out and redeem your people. On the certifications of people who have been taken onto the chambers of adeptus, and many who've become ministers within that civic and religious movement, it says the hedges and the highways. In the divine warning, which we tell people continued, now notice how redundant this is. Divine warning by the prophet for the nation. He says what? Help me in my great missionary work to bring my people back into the constitutional fold of government, enforcing our Constitution for the United States of America. That's documented, that's clear, that's direct, that's civics. But how many people keep telling these people that that's religion? The concept is wrong. Therefore, it has forced people who've been trying to help to redundantly try to break the spell that these people are under because they won't take responsibility for themselves to enforce the Constitution. Now, when you go to Article 6 of the Constitution for the United States, what it says, all contracts and engagements entered into before the adoption of this Constitution shall be binding against the United States under this Constitution as under the Confederation, and all treaties made which shall be made shall be the supreme, in pursuance thereof, shall be the supreme law of the land. And how long have we been telling people that the treaty in the Constitution comprises the supreme law of the land? Who were opposing us? People who were claiming to be sheiks. People who were claiming to be grand governors. And logically, the corporate, United States corporate operatives of the Circle Church and Chancery certainly wasn't going to contest, because they were what? Behind them, paying them off with a 501c3 contract. And so our words were falling, how do you say, like
deaf ears,
on deaf ears. And so if people don't get it, we have to go out and try to get some who do. We can't keep on arguing with people who say, oh, I heard that before. Well, it's not for you. It's for people who have grown up, who got families who are suffering today because they don't know the rules of the game. It's not to reconvince somebody who heard this 25 years ago, because if they really comprehended, they would have carried it out, and they would have been teaching these people. We would have taken the burden off of us to try to do what they should be doing with their own families. Now look at this.
And we did
You bring in, 2019, just before they pulled this stuff on a heavy level, I sent a little note around, maybe still on your old phone. And I told these people they was going to take their toilet paper and put them back in line to keep them in check. Everybody got to go to the bathroom. We can't go around the world with people who are beginning to get conscious, you know, and you say, all right, I'm in the bathroom, I'm finished, come in and wipe my key stores. We can't do that. You have to start taking responsibility to confess your own. It's your birthright. You must assist. If you have the knowledge and you've heard, that means that you have taken your social duty responsibility and taught some others. And if you haven't, don't look for us to do it. That means you have breached your responsibility to yourself and to your family members and to people around you. And if you had been doing that, we wouldn't have to have this conversation today. However, on another side note, many people around the world have taken the information and activated. This is why you're having trade route problems now. You need to know that the straw man constructs are being choked out. This is why the private commercial paper of the Jesuits are being sent back to the board of directors of the Chancery Church and Chancery, known as the U.S. Corporation Company, which is creating the inflation that you're suffering right now. They're going to be, which we've been telling you, stealing what you thought was your bank accounts to save themselves. You can't say we haven't been telling you for over 20 years. Take your fiat out of the banks. They're going to steal it. They did it in 2008, which should have woken these people up. They haven't. We told the people, start buying silver and gold while it's low. Put your stuff, put your energy, because all of those are energy vouchers. They are vouchers. It's not money. How redundantly, Dr. G, have we went to the congressional records and we put it on a flash drive so that the people can see the speeches that were made on the floor of the House of Representatives. And one of the speakers was Representative from Ohio, known as James Traficant, who I talked to personally years ago. And they murdered him for exposing this information and told the people it was an accident. Federal Reserve notes are not money. Credit is not money. Currency is not money. Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution, read it. The states cannot by law make anything but gold or silver coin for payment in debt. You can't pay a debt with private commercial paper, which comprises vouchers of the private corporate United States company registered in Austria, operated from Davos, Switzerland, what these people haven't told you. We've been telling you for years, and you've been spending more time condemning us for telling you than condemning those who are stealing your birthright. Your anger, your frustration is misdirected. So we knock the dust off our heels, tarry not, and take it to people who want it.
There's a lot of good comments here, Grand Sheik. It's just that, people are frustrated, and I get it. Don't. It's not that I don't.
You have a right to.
Yeah, I get it, but
convert that to work.
But here's the thing: I know where I'm coming from. I know my commitment, and I'm pretty sure that the last 11 years working closely with you as I have, I know where your heart is and your commitment. I know that there are other things that you and I both could be doing that had nothing to do with outreaching anything to the people. So this is an assignment. This is a you got to do it, and whosoever will.
It's a divine assignment, whether you like it or not.
It's for. But I do get the frustration, y'all.
You know how they say they've made many movies, and this is redundant. Just like, as we talked over the years, Doc, right?
Mm-hmm.
Look how many people, right, rather than pay attention to the information and do the study, they'll spend that energy that they should be using to study to condemn the fact that the information is being exposed. which is disingenuous. Not just is it disingenuous, it's irresponsible.
And a lot of people, and rightfully say, because I get a lot of calls. You don't know all the calls I get. So I'll get calls from people who've been burnt. And so like somebody put a comment in here about what I advertised something, and I'm not even going to mention it. But I will say that you haven't seen me advertise that lately, because one of the things I do is once I find out that there's complaints or problems with something, be it a product or a service, I pull it. Because first of all, nobody pays me. That particular one gave us a donation whenever they felt like it. But 99.9% of these ads that flow across the screen are not paid, y'all. We don't get paid. Most of these are people who have been on our show, on my show mainly on office hours, and I run their ads under there because I appreciate and respect what they do. I do not get compensated, not paid. I do not get compensated for that. But when I find out that there are complaints coming in about something's validity or whatever it's doing, or even if it's something that I'm connected to, if it stops being what I said it was when I put it out there, then you won't see it anymore. And that's integrity. It's all about integrity. Whether Grand Sheik has been on Sinetta's show and who exposed what, Grand Sheik has gone on a lot of shows and to put the information out, but he's not been connected to the host. He's connected to the House of Reawakening Minds. That's for sure. But he's been over the years, because I'm just looking at comments and so
from California to Texas to Tennessee to Michigan,
and then some of those people have turned on you, but you keep on doing what you're doing because you have a mission, a divine mission. And I believe that we divinely were connected to do and work together the way we have for the last 11 years, now, whether some like it or not.
Look at the nature of this conversation.
It just has to be
What is this information for? What is its function? So that you yourself can vet the information from whomever you get it.
Absolutely.
Not for someone to come save you, that you are competent to vet the information when it comes in. Even like, say, for instance, you know how like many people came through different orders, even people over the years who came past the house, right? And dealt with these people, right? If they knew these rules, they would have not what? They would have not been played by some of those people, because they would know how to vet. Because you know the rules of the game of contract. How many times have we told the people the distinction between rights and privileges, Doctor?
Many times.
And what have people who have been dishonorable doing to people who don't know the rule of contract? They've been selling them rights under the guise and converting their rights to privileges. And taking advantage of them. But the knowledge of contract law will do what? Eliminate those parasites among us, which is again why we're having this conversation. No different than, look how many organizations that people belong to. Some of these same people that are listening that have some knowledge and never research what a 501c3 skull and bones agreement is. And yet many of the organizations that they've been giving their so-called dues to and funding to have a 501c3 agreement, and they never even looked it up. And it's a contract. Even the people under the auspices of the skull and bones agreement have been convinced that there was a separation of church and state. And if they knew contract law, they would have known that the church owned this corporate state. That's simple. And would have guided their own actions accordingly. Again, while we're having this conversation, why? We can't do it for them.
No.
You can't run through these different orders telling this men and women, oh, don't put that 10% Roman tax in that tray. That's my tithe. Well, that's what tithe means. 10% Roman tax never meant anything else. You can tell people, but you can't make them. As a matter of fact, they might take that tray and smack you upside the head for telling them.
Well, when Creflo told him that it wasn't right, but then he backed it up and said, well, you don't really have to give 10 because you can give as much as you want.
Yeah.
But when he told him it was a big deal.
It was really taking the karmic debt off himself. because you already know that that's Pope Sylvester II. Had nothing to do with Jesus or Moses.
Right. But a lot of the folks that we deal with probably have already broken with that paradigm in a sense, but it's just doesn't mean that there's not any residual.
Let's look at this.
Some residue.
Look how many. As a matter of fact, let's look back at the house, right? Which we're trying to, finish up doing some work now. I remember roughly about 11 years ago, 10 or 11 years ago, your little niece was there pregnant. And the children are here now. However, when we went down there, when we went to the little thing that they had down at the waterfront or at that building, and she was there.
My niece or my granddaughter?
Yeah, your granddaughter.
Oh, okay.
I apologize.
Okay.
But that includes your nieces too, okay. and whatever. But I'm just saying, the baby is running around now, and in another 5 years, she'll be a young lady, a young woman, and potentially fertile. They need this information, which is why, again, I qualified when we opened up, because I already knew that some disingenuous people would immediately start trolling. Some people who have not carried out their obligation would start complaining rather than helping other people who did not comprehend, would burn up our time sidelining to explain truth that they claim that they already had, that clearly they haven't been sharing.
Yeah. It's a combination, but it's folks on here that genuinely don't know and are asking.
Those
but like
are the
you
ones
said,
we're talking
but then there's others that know, but they have, agendas and they want to, voice them. And there's others that want
to capitalizing off the people who lacked information, which has also been part of our problem. Now, what is the key to us talking about contract principle? So that people who are not afforded this knowledge can start protecting themselves. No one can protect. You have to apply it.
Now, here's a question that I have, because there's a lot of questions about our own government and all that. And you don't want to our own community.
No, we talk about assumptions.
Yeah, but
all right,
but being independent of this. So, and folks want to know, well, how come we haven't done it? And what comes to mind, or say like the Amish or the Mennonites. Now, if those people have been able to become community and be recognized.
Let's slow down. They are now under attack.
Oh, are they?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Don't be thinking that they've been getting away, because remember, when as the private commercial bottomry instruments of the private commercial paper of the banks of the Jesuits are being returned to these so-called United States senators and congressmen, etc., which they're not talking to the public about, that all foreign persons who have been claiming sovereign jurisdictional heirship on the land are subject to that, because they're still part of the colonial body's politic. So they're being thrown under the bus also. This is why you see a lot of hybrid Europeans all of a sudden in the last 7 or 8 years are starting to talk about Gesara and Nasara to save their own estates. You didn't hear them talking like this 20 years ago. Only active Moors of the Round Table or the Great Seal, who were being attacked from both sides. So don't act like you don't know what's going on.
Here's a comment from Magical T, and she said, and because you've addressed this before, but I'm just gonna put it up there. She says, I don't understand how you have to jump through their hoop and do paperwork after paperwork to play their rules. You have opinions about
it's
paperwork.
Not their rules. This is your knowledge of estate. It is dissolving. Like I've always told people, if you don't put your reversion of estate claims in the public record for public discourse, it is an assumed abandonment of your estate.
So this would be an easy one for you to say. So the reversion of estate, once
is your action or action on it.
Once they got that and put that together,
that's what started killing the straw man.
Would they put that in a newspaper? Would they put that on somebody's website? Well, I mean, how? No, you said in the public. So if it's a matter of putting it out in the public, then what is
the public?
Now it's
what is the public?
The media.
It's called Proclamation. Let's go back to what.
Okay, so we're talking about judicial notices of proclamation.
Yeah, give me like the Quran as an example.
Oh, there it is. It was on the table.
I think it's on here.
Well, here's the smaller version. Here.
One of the things that Noble Drawley says, right? He says the most powerful weapon in our hands of our people, our group today, is our press.
Right.
Why do you think even to this day, even like some people ask, that we're not on, what happened originally? And we just simply maintain this. They started doing what? Backdooring the computers, glitching, trying to block this information.
Yeah, they
so
shut you down.
We adjusted to the circumstance to get this information out. And found from response of many people that they start paying more attention because they weren't busy looking at what we were wearing or how long your braids grew this time.
Locks.
I mean, I'm just saying, and that's not a knock. It's just that people need to comprehend that they've been warring against us. And it's not fictional. And the same, how many decades we've been telling people the origin of the shadow banning and the sanctioning and the demonetization that they're suffering from right now is what? Indexus librorum expurgatorius, indexus librorum prohibitorum, i.e., the great Constantine, quote unquote, fake Christian book burnings, which they're called now sanctioning, shadow banning, demonetization. They never ended the war. We keep thinking that it ended. We keep telling them it's unum sanctum. They keep saying, oh, you said that before. Before I was born.
It was unum sanctum.
If we can't influence, which we're trying to do, the people to start confessing their own willingly, that means they will not to. Rome is declaring such persons as wards of their corporate state who have abandoned by tacit acquiescence their right of estate. That's where the bottom reinstruments come in. That's what has been funding the stock market. It's not that we haven't been telling the people, but can we make people rescind when they don't want to? But what we can do is for those who would hear to redirect their energies, to redirect their service that they've been burning, wasting their generations in all of these institutions, all of them, that they have been funding, that are mere customs of men that has never done them any good and has always harmed them, yet they've been funding them. How many of our people have been funding the Zionist organization known as the NAACP since 1909?
A lot of ours.
But yet they've never done the research to find out that it's a Zionist organization against their own interests. And mad at people like me who tell them that truth, but because they've been doing it and their grandma's been doing it and their family members are members, they'd rather attack people like me who are telling them to be responsible, well, why don't you come in and do something for them? Now, the deal of it is, it's every man, every woman, and even every child's responsibility to confess their own. We can't make them do it. We can suggest, but we also know the war is real and that there will be casualties. The deal of it is, because the Roman priesthood is recognizing that the world is beginning to turn on them, it's going to crash the entire economic structure, and people will be sacrificed right along with it. Now, people are starting to feel it where they can't deny it anymore.
Right.
We've been sharing this information to help people prepare for what we knew was going to come. Now, here it is, and we're calling out again to those who are waking up and are absent of some tools that they didn't know they had. And when I read the principle of contract, didn't it talk about constructing contract and destroying them? Well, the destroying of a contract is called a reversion of estate. And all we're doing is refining different areas of information that we've already given them to encourage them to activate. But we're not going to sit here and argue with them. It's too much work to be done, and there's too few people that ultimately will save themselves. We already know the prophecy. That's their choice, and we're not going to sit here, like I told you before. You remember, over the years, many people, just like many people who come along the way, have offered in their mind large sums of fiat to me to have private consultation. I do not do it.
I know you don't.
Because I don't do this for fiat. Because I also know from a divine perspective, birthright cannot be sold. Doesn't mean that a servant is not worthy of their hire, if you understand.
Right, because some people
servant is worthy of
charge.
their hire. However, birthright cannot be sold.
You're right.
We know that service compensation and help is due and honorable. The point of it is it's not unlike the rule, Dr. G, that you hear people saying, an honorable teacher, will give a hungry man or woman or child a fish sandwich and then turn around and show them how to fish. A selfish one will give them a fish sandwich, then make them subject and make them dependent on them selling them fish and not teach them the rules. Here at the House of Reawakening Minds, we do the best we can to stay with integrity and honor and show people the rules of the game so that they can take their energy that they're already spending already. It's not like they don't have it, and redirect it. However, we want you also to know that as we're speaking, many people who have been carrying out what we've been saying, unbeknownst to some of them and known to others, this is why the stock market is collapsing. Because the binary instruments are no longer being accepted around the world. That's what the trading was. It wasn't the Federal Reserve notes or the US dollar. The US dollar is the voucher that's used for the transfer of the bookkeeping of the resources, which is the issue. We've been going all kinds of angles to continuously tell these people that they can't pay a bill and they've never been paid. And then we've shown it to them over and over. Some listened, some didn't. However, the point that I also want to make to you is that nation states from around the world are carrying out what the conscious Moors or the people who are nationalized should have been doing for the last 100 years. And for those who haven't done it, you're going to get caught in the rubble. You don't have to apply this information. If it offends you, discard it. Change the channel. But there will be no apologies for the truth. No matter what angle of complaint or what angle or sly way they try to troll. Take responsibility. The birthright is yours, as is the responsibility for its restoration. We've given you keys to help you in those matters. You can use them, you can discard them. Whosoever will, let them hear. Whosoever will, let them come. No one's going to come and save you but you. If someone, because there's been many men and women who have sacrificed their personal lives to bring this information to you, and many of them are not breathing because you didn't come to their defense. And you allowed Rome to murder them. And you got pictures on your walls from Yeshua to Malcolm and talking about how great they were, as if they owed you that. They didn't owe you that. It's your responsibility just like it is theirs. Take responsibility. And those who want this information, we're trying our best to share intelligently, rationally, with integrity and with honor. And if it offends you, don't listen. And if you think Rome and their minions are not going to sacrifice you and your families, I suggest that you rethink, because you got another thought coming. Because even most of these people didn't even know that the introduction of foreign matter into their arms and veins has nanobots in it. And it's patented. It's not that they couldn't know that. They chose not to read. Now, it's not that people haven't been telling them. But, put it this way. Whosoever will, let them hear. Now, if somebody tell you it's doo-doo on the lawn, it's not peanut butter, don't get mad because they didn't help fund black organization to make doo-doo perfume to make it palatable. We don't do black perfume for lawn doo-doo to tell our people that it's perfume. However, we know that some people want it that way because that's their training. We're not mad at them. We're not angry at them. However, we're not addressing them. No. We're addressing them that want liberty. We're addressing those who want to restore their lost estate, knowing that everybody don't want the truth. We're not angry at you, but we're not going to apologize for telling the truth.
Will, there were some questions. I saw at least one question when you mentioned reversion of the state, and it was how to do a reversion of state. But I believe we do have.
It's on the flash drive. We've been teaching it for years.
On the flash drive, which I'm going to put the link up again. We do have
and it kills the straw.
Right now, as far as he just said to you, where you would you would need to publish it, make it public, make it, just like you do your proclamation.
Exactly. That's what proclamation means.
Judicial notice, proclamation. There are websites that have, give you, let you put that out, as long as it's in the public.
What comprises government? People need to comprehend. This is back to what we talk about civics. When you make public discourse on principal rules validated, i.e., by binding contract and treaty, it's called public discourse. That action is government. And people who tell you don't do that because it's their stuff, and you listen to them, that's also your choice.
What do you mean don't do that?
When people say, oh, you're doing their stuff.
Well,
that's because they don't know civics. It's sort of like somebody want to cut your hair and don't know barbering. Don't mean they can't cut your hair. Some make you sharp. You could. Some.
Most won't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you're just basically saying, as we the people, we're not taking on the responsibilities that we have
Back to
inherent
what
in
you
us.
said earlier, right? The people, they're going to try to use their education to fix things because they think their education is sufficient for human development and ascension. Because no one told them that it's animal husbandry because they didn't want to hurt their feelings. Now, the deal of it is we're sharing erudition. It's offending people because they're trying to look at their education platform to measure this by.
True.
It doesn't fit because it's an elevation.
But you know what? You mentioned it when I mentioned today, and I don't know if he never seen my video, but my friend who had run for mayor here ran into him today and had the occasion for him to tell me, all the things he was still doing before retirement, among which, and he was, when I knew him, an educator. I taught him what you taught me about erudition versus education and animal husbandry. In that brief discourse while I was waiting to come pick you up at the train station, he made the connection of what animal husbandry or education was. He was like, everybody line up, raise your hand for this. He said, yeah, this. And he was telling me the
They're
things.
on the farm.
I said, this by rote, and this is how, and he got it. He got it, and the light bulb went on. This man has been educated for years and didn't know
he got a degree in education.
Right? But I'm saying somebody who that quick
because he was open.
Right.
His ego. Because remember, a lot of people who reject this information, their ego is really what they're speaking from.
Right. Especially if they have a degree.
Because they start blocking because they think that you're attacking them. Like people who can't swim, and you throw them a life raft, and it's plaid, and it don't match their relief, and they say, I know you didn't throw me a plaid life raft. I'm Baptist. Because it's not what they're used to.
Yeah.
They're measuring it by their beliefs. Right. Belief does not equate knowledge. But because they were trained under animal husbandry, that beliefs equal spirituality, which it doesn't.
Right.
And they won't let it go and deal with knowledge. Let's look at this. Yeshua, we already know the password is Jesus, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, my people are destroyed by the day for a lack of knowledge. Now, who do they listen to? The preacher who keeps telling them it's a lack of prayer and a lack of tithing. But the one they keep claiming that they're trying to follow, Yeshua, Jesus, says a lack of knowledge. Then you bring them knowledge and they say, I don't believe that. That's where your problem is.
Mm-hmm. Not
knowing that the priesthood is a minion of the Vatican. And it's provable and traceable. Just like, for instance, like how many people, Dr. G, in our communities, and it's not condemning people for trying, but we just want to keep this stuff simple, right?
Mm-hmm.
Many of you who are listening with us right now in the House of Reawakening Minds, go in your older dictionary and look up Niceno-Constantinopolitan Creed. And that is the official name of what has been presented to people in the modern world as Christianity. That's the official name. How many people in our communities all over this country, Dr. G, have been going to church for generations and don't even know that's the official name?
Well, when I got, in the church, we were told that that's what they call, I believe, the Apostles' Creed. Part of it, of the Apostles' Creed comes from the Niceno-Constantinople. That one comes from that, and they just
now, as soon as they see the word Constantine, they should know it ain't saying Jesus.
Yeah.
Then when they look up the Nicene Council is 325 years after the assassination of Yeshua.
Mm-hmm.
And yet that same preacher will tell them that he came down from heaven on a cloud and brought them Christianity.
Yeah.
As it's been presented to them, and that they can't be saved without it. That's in an ordinary child's dictionary. It's not even hidden. And when you present it, they act like you're attacking their beliefs with their own church's own records. Document it. All scholars know it. All preachers know it. All reverends know it. All imams know it. All rabbis know it. And yet the average person who's been funding their own enslavement under Constantine will sit around and complain and talk about how much they love Jesus, and then turn around and say he was a Jew, which is an absolute contradiction. Can you make people undo what they keep doing to themselves just because you're telling the truth and they don't want to hear it? Because their ego is in the way and they won't humble themselves and learn? Meanwhile, you're supposed to be responsible for their obstinates. And then Rome is abusing them constantly. And then they want to accuse Yeshua, the Nazarene, for having founded the Constantine order, of which he had nothing to do with. And it doesn't take deep research to find it out. And then they want to get mad at people that are showing people who want to learn that truth, because they don't want to lose tithe-paying members.
Somebody they want you to create a statehood for the Moors.
You
need to create a statehood for the Moors.
It already exists. They need to come back. The people keep saying, we need to create a new will. No, you need to get the will. The will's been here. How many times have we shown, even when, and we use an example of the treaties. In the treaty book I did years ago, I've been showing the relationship of the politics. I've been going to the Secretary of State, showing the Secretary of State of the United States, and under the law, it says Morocco. It's not hidden. And Drew Ali told him right in the Quran. And then people who've been in the temples will turn around and say, Drew Ali didn't teach civics. Obama went to what? Talking before the World Council, telling you the history. Treaty of Tripoli, showing you the Moorish flag, took pictures. Anybody can go on computer right now and see it. Daughter of American Revolution, member, known as Hillary Clinton, spoke from the Ben Franklin room, which we've been showing people for years. Showing behind her the trading banner, which is the Stars and Stripes, and the Al-Moroccan flag, the American flag, i.e., red flag, 5-pointed green star right in the center. And they never speak from the plenipotentiary's room unless they're sending a message to the public. It's not that it's hidden. Those who want to find the truth will find it. Those who don't want it will sit and reject this and attack people because they're telling the truth. Because it will destroy institutions that they're part of. And they think you're attacking them when you're actually trying to help them liberate themselves. But it's still their choice. It's still whosoever will. And they're trying to say, oh, you're supposed to will it. Oh, how dare you not spread the peanut butter on my sandwich for me? Because I'm busy smoking a joint with the other hand. This is what they do. They always want people to do for them what they should do for themselves. Get out of the dependent mentalities, part of your enslavement. Take responsibility. It's part of your enslavement. Know the truth if you want to be liberated and free. Beliefs will not free you. Sitting on your butt will not free you. Waiting for another sacrificial lamb will not liberate you. Every man, every woman, every child must confess their own, but you don't have to either. It's a choice. That's called tacit acquiescence in contract law. Go down to the local municipalities and look at all foreclosures. They will have on them abandonment. It's not going to say lack of payment, abandonment. What are you dealing with? You're dealing with a heritability, i.e., estate law and principles in contract, which we're trying our best to share with you, absent of the distractions that keep coming through, which kills up the time, which is why the purpose of trolling is for, to distract you and get you arguing or trying to apologize for telling the truth, which is also why we must be redundant.
Well, we will do this again, y'all. We want to thank you.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you for sharing with us.
We still love you.
Yeah,
Look,
we do.
We love you.
And it's not for people who had this information.
We get excited.
We're appealing to people who don't know, because a lot of the people that we've given this information to 25 years ago had children, and their children have already had children who are now in the workforce and are paying energy through the voucher system that they've been told is money, and you haven't taught them. Therefore, we must still be redundant.
I'm going to own this question right really quick. I don't know.
Anyway, write some of that stuff down. We'll continue.
Well, someone wanted to know whether or not you could speak on executing reversion of estate relative to old convictions, which are jurisdictionally deficient ab initio by way of quo warranto.
Yeah, look on that flash drive and pull that. There's a subtitle in there called Reversion, and read that, and that'll give you the fundamentals and give you directives that you can go get your concepts correct, and you use that principle. Because remember, with knowledge is the principle. You don't even have to duplicate that, but it tells you all you need to know. It's not that we haven't been giving the people information that they can go ahead and work themselves, because what are we trying to do? What we're doing, clearing concepts. It's sort of like we're not trying to count for you. We're trying to show you the rules of counting.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of information on there. It's a 16 gigabyte flash drive, but it doesn't have quite 16 gigs.
It has
about 11, almost 11 gigs of information. There's a lot of data, but it has it's 8 different folders in there. With one is called Taj Tarik Bey. In there, you're going to find the reversion.
Can we take a herd of horses and make them drink?
No, but I'm just telling them, if you got the flash drive and you probably have open Taj Tarik Bey folder. So
we're doing the best
you're going to find Reversion there. I'm also going to give a for the House of Reawakening Minds folder on there, because I've worked very hard to put that together with, and you all who have it, say something in the comments about how full of information it is, so that folks will know that it's not just a a light thing, but they're getting a lot of information.
It's designed for responsibility, people taking responsibility to add on or to enhance what they already know.
Yes.
And for others to gain information that they didn't know about.
Right.
In other words, it's to share erudition that they'll never get in the school system.
Right.
Never. And it's not to pat ourselves on the back. It's not about ego. So please don't take it that way.
No.
It's about liberation. Yep. Sincerely.
And listen, we are almost finished. We're not. We're approaching the completion of the work that we're trying to do, so that in 2023, we can have those of you who are able to come to the physical location of the House of Reawakening Minds. You will have a place to come, and we'll be able, some of these subject matters that understandably we cannot and will not address in this forum, we will be able to do then, and we will let you know when that happens, so that you can come and we're going to try to do at least once a month.
Yes, and let's make this statement, because I want everyone to respectfully know this. People, for the most part, are not aware that they can dissolve these contracts that they're in.
Right.
See, they've been trained under animal husbandry that once they put their autograph or signature to a thing, that the burden exists, even though they don't understand what they've signed.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been dealing, many people, for years, but they didn't know contract law, that they have the same right to dissolve it or to destroy it. That's called reversion.
Reversion.
That's why when I opened up And I didn't even hit all the points. I only hit a few points that I intended to. But that's why I read that from the beginning. But I can't stop people who are not listening. I can't make them listen.
Right.
If they're not, all I can do is trust that somebody's listening.
Yes.
And if we get 1 out of 10, we're ahead of the game. And if we get 2 and somebody who's sincerely trying to help somebody else rather than try to take advantage of them, which is what our mission is. There's no way that anybody, the best housekeeper can't sweep everybody's floor. Don't ask them to. It's not fair. Get a broom.
Start sweeping.
Have a good night.
Well, all righty. Well, I also we want to remind the sisters, I want to thank you. We are just trying to work on the platform large enough. We have to increase our platform and to have our first big meeting with the War Sisters, Grand Sheik. I wanted, because there are over 200 sisters who have signed. So if you sent your information in, trust me, you are on the list. It's just that we are trying to get this platform together that we can all meet on, because it's a very now a large group. But we are.
Excuse me, interjection. See, even people who are more erudite in some of these things, which is why we put the house together, because you already know a lot of things that we did say we were shut down for. We were put in digital prison, literally.
Yes.
One of the actions that they did is why they're not looking at us right now. We just stopped fighting it and did the best we could with what we had. But the people need to comprehend that even those who are erudite can come to a venue like that, and you can have little detail classes where people can learn.
Absolutely.
The refined exercise. It's not that we haven't been doing it over the years, but it takes energy to be done. And it takes people to help get the work done. And it takes people to stop buying that case of beer, the blunt, and the wine, and put it to a book. Stop trying to buy
or flash drive.
the fake Gucci belt and the Nike sneaks, and buy yourself some decent, well-structured foot gear. Stop feeding those entities that are actually screwing our people, and rebuild your libraries. You can't say we haven't been telling you some of the major books that you need. You can't say that we haven't. You can't say that we haven't given you a list of words and phrases that will definitely help you and your family. You can't say that we haven't been showing people the fundamentals of writs. It's been the very nature of the Order of the Round Table to dispense that information since 1968.
Absolutely.
Come on. Give us a break.
And before we go, and you see up there on the screen, y'all, we do need your sustaining support, and we're just urging you all to, send $1 a month. It would be, we have these two methods. And
that's an energy transfer.
Just an energy transfer.
Know that this is what people need to comprehend too. And this is with all due respect and honor. They need to know that the Federal Reserve notes that they've been trained from childhood is $1. Is not $1. It is a voucher which accesses via the Sister QV trust set up by the United States Corporation Company, attached to the World Global Trust controlled by the Vatican. The route to it is through the Circle Church and Chancery, i.e. the Bar Association, who are not going to tell you what we're telling you because they're part of the leech system. So you shouldn't expect the criminals who are doing this to you to tell you this. And don't get angry because we're telling you this.
Right. So again, like I said, we're trying to do some renovation, the building, and we have another project that we have to add on, which actually is going to be real beneficial for those, coming to the house. It's just that it's going to cost us about, $3,000 to do it. So, but we trust that, you all who believe in what we're doing, because we want you to come back to the house. We want you to physically come back to the house. I love the energy when they
so we can say some things that you know that we can't say to you.
That's right. We want
we can't.
We want you back.
Don't act like you
physically in the house, and y'all know who used to come. And
they're not going to allow us to tell you. As a matter of fact, if we say some of these things which you already know, they would be shutting us down in process.
Right.
You already know that.
And I'm going to give a shout out to y'all who haven't. I know a lot of you have since she was on the show, but if you have not, please go and check out Dr. Kia Pruitt and her YouTube channel. Every day almost she's giving information and uncensored. So those, I see a lot of more now that are on the commenting and so forth, and I'd like to think that this platform had something to do with that too. But those of you who have not checked out Dr. Kia Pruitt, please do so, because she has an awesome platform with a lot of information.
Yes.
With that, until next time,
have a grand evening.
Have a grand evening.
And thank you for supporting the House of Reawakening Minds, because the official House of Reawakening Minds is here to support you.
Yes. Thank you so much.
The deeper and deeper I go, I find what it is I should know. 'Cause it's just a matter of time that you'll reawaken your mind. Oh, come with me, come to know and find out what is true. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening minds. Come to know and find out what is truth, yes. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening mine.